think we're going to go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Transfer Talk Tuesday. Today we are going to have members of the OATN team, Jared Shank and Abby Cohen, speak about the expansion of military credit policy that offers credit towards an ATS degree for military occupational training, as well as updates for the 2025 Collegiate Purple Star. We are going to be watching the chat, so feel free to put any questions in there, and we will go ahead and answer those at the end. So for now, I am going to go ahead and pass it over to Jared and Abby.
Hello, I'm Jared Shank. I'll just do a quick introduction, and then I'll turn it over to Abby so you can get started with the Collegiate Purple Star. I'm Jared Shank, Senior Director for Military and Apprenticeship Initiatives and Special Projects. So I think hopefully most of you know who I am. So I'll kick it over to Abby and let Abby get started.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Jared, and thank you all for joining us on this lovely cloudy Tuesday afternoon. I'm excited to talk about Ohio's military-friendly designation for colleges and universities, known as the Collegiate Purple Star designation. And this initiative recognizes institutions that go above and beyond in supporting military-connected students, including veterans, active duty service members, and their families. And the image you see on this slide is the official Collegiate Purple Star logo, which we provide to institutions once they've earned the designation. And Brittany, if you could go to the next slide, please. So the development of the Collegiate Purple Star designation began back in 2017 when members of the Ohio Veterans Education Council, or OVEC, took a closer look at national military-friendly rankings, and they quickly realized that many of those systems were pay-to-play, and they didn't necessarily reflect the real quality of support provided to military-affiliated students. So to address this gap, OVEC collaborated with the Ohio Department of Higher Education to draft Ohio-specific, meaningful, service-based criteria for a new state designation. And those criteria were formally adopted in 2022 through a directive from the Chancellor, which officially launched the Collegiate Purple Star designation. And the application itself for the Collegiate Purple Star is a structured Word document that guides institutions through each requirement and asks them to verify how they meet that criteria. And applications are reviewed by a multi-agency committee, including representatives from Ohio colleges and universities, Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, Ohio Department of Veterans Services, and the Ohio Department of Higher Education, as well as the governor's office, to ensure a fair and comprehensive review process. And once this is awarded, the designation remains active for 3 years, after which the institution must submit a renewal application to maintain its status. Next slide, please. So this map that I have here shows the institutions across Ohio that have currently earned the Collegiate Purple Star designation. It highlights the reach and growth of the program over the past few years as more colleges and universities work to strengthen their support for military-connected students. I'll give you a couple seconds to look at all the institutions that we have so far. And next slide, please. So all the information related to the Collegiate Purple Star designation, including eligibility criteria, application materials, and designated institutions, can be found on our website. And if you visit the homepage and scroll down, you'll see a link labeled Collegiate Purple Star. That page is going to house everything institutions need to get started. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jared.
All right, thank you, Abby. And just as a reminder, we showed it on there, but that is available for public and privates or any institution operating in the state of Ohio. So it's a good way to get, especially the non-public institutions, doing a lot more for the military audience. So this slide, you're going to wonder, what in the world does this have to do with military credit? I'm stolen this from Dr. Lisa Holstrom, who's on the call here for her work she does with OTC degree pathways, but this will make sense in a couple minutes as I talk about this. But I wanted to give this as an example so that when I reference it later that you kind of know what in the world I'm talking about in the first place, in case you are unaware. So there is an OTC degree pathway in Ohio, kind of two elements to this, and one of those is if a student is at the OTCs, the Ohio Technical Centers, and they do a 900 clock hour program, that's meets certain criteria and the chancellor approves it, they're eligible for a 30-hour block of technical credit for an ATS degree. And in some cases that changes if there's like iTags embedded in the program and whatnot. And I don't want to get into this too deep. I just wanted to explain the concept real quick because I'm going to reference this a little bit later. So there's kind of several different options here of, the OTC doing a block of credit going into an ATS, and then an avenue where there's a lot more iTags and that same program can fit potentially into an AAS or an AAB, one of those other applied degrees. Next slide. So the basics of military credit, kind of the status quo, has been essentially what we call the MTAGs, Military Transfer Assurance Guides. Those piggyback on other statewide guarantees, such as the Transfer Assurance Guides, the entry level major work, as well as the OT36, the General Education work, the Career Technical Assurance Guides, the CTAGs, all of those things. Essentially, the way we function at the state level is we kind of act as an institutional coordinator for the military, and we submit the military coursework to the same faculty panels that your institutional coordinators submit your coursework to. And if that faculty panel deems that it's an equivalency, then it becomes an MTAG, and we as Department of Higher Education send out a memo, typically to your registrars or your military credit type person on your campus to basically say, hey, this new military course is now an MTAG. You can see an example here on this slide is, the Air Force course, the ELT 1702 is DC circuits. The tag version of that same course, there's the Ohio articulation number code is the OET 003. And then, that goes over and meets, DC circuit requirements. So that's essentially how the MTAGs work. But there's a lot of military credit that comes through that's not MTAG. So it's kind of important to recognize that as well, is that MTAGs are limited by the statewide guarantees we have. And the military has a massive course inventory of information and courses out there. So if something comes to you as an institution, as an advisor, whomever, if it's not evaluated and already processed as an MTAG, you might need to have that then evaluated or send it out to the appropriate department on your campus to have them evaluate that credit. So that's something that the schools still need to be doing. Next slide. So what just happened where we've essentially went into what I call an expansion of military credit policy is over the last year, we started having a lot of discussions. The first one of those was around the iTags, the Industry Recognized Credential Transfer Assurance Guides. So that's an initiative, if you're not aware of, where we're recognizing essentially third-party credentials for credit. Generically calling it, credit for credentials. The way that works is, if you have a certain certification, like say one of the Microsoft certifications, and the same faculty panel basically blesses that and says, hey, that certification should be equivalent to our course because we teach that whole course for you to meet that certification, it essentially becomes an iTag. The same kind of thing happens. The schools get that information, it gets encoded in the system. Well, one of the things we started looking for was, would there be any military specific iTags out there? And in most cases, the military typically uses civilian credentials for their needs. But one of the sort of Achilles heels of the military with the world of credentials is that even though the military might use the same curriculum as some of those credentials, the military might not actually pay for that service member to complete and receive that credential, because the military basically feels, hey, they've done the training now, they have the skills, we don't really care if they have their credential because we have them for several years and they are essentially doing that job in the field every day. It's not a big deal for us. So they basically tell the service member, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, if you want that credential, you need to go pay for that yourself, essentially. So we've been trying to figure out, okay, what occupations have things like that? And this might not be the greatest example, but one of them I'll mention is like the mechanics who do like ASE certifications and things like that. The military usually doesn't pay for the certification, but they'll use the exact same curriculum. So we're starting to have conversations now of, okay, if a new iTag is being developed, is number one, is it applicable to anything going on in the military? And then two, if the military is not using that credential, is that faculty panel willing to entertain that discussion of, can the military training be treated the same as a credential? Basically treating the military like it's another third party entity that's doing a credential service. Because one of the things that we look for with iTags is is, it's a third-party entity, but then there's also some level of assessment. And that's something that the military does have going for it, is you do get assessed, you do have to pass it, you do have to be functional in that field. So we had very positive reactions with the faculty panels groups that we talked to about that. So that's something that we wanted to bring to our oversight board, the OATN oversight board, made up of provosts, presidents, and whatnot. And basically, we over the course of the last few months got that passed into policy that we can look at military training, basically treating it the same way as an ITAG, have the military qualify for that essentially. The other element of that is what you see below, and I referenced earlier with the OTC degree pathways, is we started really thinking, okay, if we can have the Ohio Technical Centers and you show up as an adult and you do a 900 clock hour program, you're guaranteed to get, basically a 30-hour block for an ATS degree. And we're trying to figure out, okay, if the military does that same level of training, and in many cases well over the 900 clock hours, can we guarantee a 30-hour block and use it for some type of a program, ideally some type of a pathway? We don't ever want to just award credit as like just a generic, elective block. I mean, yeah, I guess that's something, but we want to try to make it actually usable for a pathway. So some of the things that we're going to start doing with that is looking at the military occupational training, seeing what the clock hours is with that, and then again, bringing it to faculty panels, especially as we go through pathways discussions. And I say pathways kind of in a broad term in that, most of the time, I don't really have like a percentage feel, but I imagine probably more than half of the time it's probably going to be tied to like the OTC pathways. But if we can tie it to the guaranteed transfer pathways, the 2+2 agreements from the associate to baccalaureates, like we want to do that as well. So I think we as being Department of Higher Ed, need to be more involved with the military side of looking at, as pathways are developed and they lay out, okay, here's the whole pathway. We want to have the ability to talk with those same faculty members who have laid out that pathway and essentially ask the question, okay, if a service member from each branch of service completes training XYZ, can you utilize that in your pathway? So for example, one of them that we haven't got to yet, but we probably will get into soon, is going to be criminal justice. We want to look at the military police academies. They don't really have a good direct fit for the Ohio Police Officer Training Academy, OPATA, but they certainly have a decent fit for criminal justice degrees. So that's one of the things we want to mention is, okay, now that you've developed a pathway for criminal justice, and many of you are willing to use like the OPATA Police Academy in that block for the pathway, are you also willing to use the military's police academies for each branch in that same manner? The hours might be a little different, but conceptually being the same. So that's an example of one way it could fit into like a guaranteed transfer pathway. And then, with the OTCs, an example of that might be one of them that's underway right now that we're still trying to kind of figure out and wrap up is HVAC. So we've got some Air Force training we've looked at that really seems to meet the entire first year of the HVAC program. And we want to figure out exactly what we want to do to roll that out. The faculty is supportive of it, and that's part of why we wanted to get this kind of expansion of credit, because we were seeing, okay, there's some value in doing this in cases where, traditionally we looked at a 1-to-1 equivalency, which is essentially what the MTAG is it's a 1-to-1. But now we're looking at other cases where the faculty might have said, there's not enough for direct equivalency, but it's still really applicable to the major. It's still usable. And that's kind of the direction we wanted to move with some of this is, okay, if we can't get an MTAG, can we at least get a block of courses that is still degree applicable in some type of a pathway? And I think that's the direction we want to go. So again, this was approved at the beginning of September. We've done a couple announcements with this. And when one of these comes out, we don't have one yet. There's a couple underway. It'll be just like a regular kind of MTAG announcement. There'd be a memo telling you and explaining how you award this credit, how it came to be, what faculty approved it, and all of those types of things. So that's something that's really exciting. That's quite a big change, and I'm curious to see where that'll take us with military credit. Next slide. All right, a couple other things I wanted to mention. I know everybody on here has absolutely read the budget bill from last year, but that is House Bill 96 was our budget bill. There was two big areas in there that kind of impact higher education with military training military connected students in some way, shape, or form. The easy one I'll mention is sort of at the bottom, which doesn't really impact the publics, but it impacts the privates. And this is the first time ever that there was a requirement for creation of rules for private institutions to evaluate military credit. So up until this point in time, private institutions had zero incentive and zero requirement to evaluate anything military credit training wise on their campuses. The one caveat that started to change that was the Collegiate Purple Star designation, because that requires schools to have a process for evaluating military training coursework and experience and how they award that and use it in programs. And if a private institution wants to apply for that designation, they had to prove and verify that they had a process in place and they were evaluating military credit. But the mentality behind this was a little bit of, if those schools, the private institutions in many cases, are receiving quite a bit of state dollars, especially things like the Ohio National Guard Scholarship Program, students attending those private institutions, that we should be requiring them to evaluate military credit, because that could be avoiding some credit duplication, saving the money for, time and money for the student as well as the state. So that was sort of the logic behind that. So that is something that is currently underway. We've got a draft out there for the private institutions to kind of start reviewing. And really what that draft is we had a military credit directive when MTAGs and all that became live with House Bill 488 way back in 2014. There was a military credit directive for the public institutions, and essentially that directive has been copy and pasted, and public institutions removed and replaced with private institutions, and a few other little elements tweaked a little bit and tailored to the private institutions, but it's very, very similar to the directive for the public institutions. So that is something that will be new. I don't know when that will be passed yet. I've had a couple private institutions review that, and they're supportive of it, but it's with the AICUO, that Association of the Independent Colleges and Universities in Ohio, and they're working with their constituents to basically make sure everybody's on the same page with that before we officially pass that directive. The other element in here, which ties back to the Collegiate Purple Star as well, is there was a couple $1 million assigned to the National Veterans Leadership Foundation. That organization exists here in Ohio, and they are really founded to essentially help any institution out there in the United States. But obviously, since this was in the Ohio budget bill, this part of it's focusing in on the Ohio schools. Essentially raise their awareness, raise fundraising and everything for military connected students on their campuses. So one of those things is what's called the Military Community Advocate Program. This exists at a few Ohio schools already, but it's going to be expanding quite a bit here in the next year because of this funding. One of the schools I can think of that's one of the key founders of that is Ohio State. Essentially, that military community advocate position is a student worker who is a military connected student embedded in some office on campus that's basically helping military connected students, or helping that office sort of understand military connected students. So for example, there's some offices that might want to hold an event or reach out to military connected students. It gives them somebody to kind of bounce some ideas off of, and advertising type ideas as well. I don't know how many times I've seen colleges and universities and people do some type of Veterans Day event or whatever, and the picture they use isn't even of an American soldier, it's a foreign country soldier, and nobody told them that that's the wrong uniform, but some veteran on their campus will eat them alive because they didn't check that. So that's an example of something like that student could do. But it's also just a regular student worker type position as well. So it can function in any office on campus, and then there's a certain amount of money that they get allocated to have some type of a military connected event for that office. So they try to organize some type of session to bring in some military connected students on the campus and celebrate. So the funding basically allows, if you wonder what that 6.3 means, at the universities who are members of the Ohio Veterans Education Council, the universities qualify for 6 of those military community advocate programs, and they just have to apply through the National Veterans Leadership Foundation. And the community colleges and private institutions qualify for 3 students. Now, there is some additional funding out there. Those numbers might increase depending on the levels of success, but that's kind of the minimum. Like that's what you can have on your campuses. Again, you don't have to pay for that. That's through the budget bill. That's something that you can outreach to the National Veterans Leadership Foundation too. some of the other stuff they do, I highlighted on here, is foundation work and a leadership summit. So one of their key missions, besides the student worker, that military community advocate, is really working with institutions, foundations, and fundraising wings to basically make that military community advocate role self-sustaining on your campus and do significant amounts of fundraising. You would be amazed at the number of schools out there who have foundation teams who go out and ask, basically asking for money to raise for various different scholarships and programs. And they never ask anybody, hey, are you a veteran? Did you ever serve? Were you a military connected alumni? All of that. And so this organization is really starting to hit that home, because some of the schools that have started doing that have been raising a decent amount of money, because they're actually targeting some of their military alumni out there to contribute to programs that are impacting military students on their campus, which they've never traditionally done in the past. And this organization is good because it just, that's what they do, essentially. That's their job, that's their function. They will basically meet with those people and start giving them a crash course in how to do that kind of outreach and recruitment for those strategies. The Leadership Summit is very similar. They start working with some of those foundation teams as well as some of the military community advocates on your campus. And basically, it's all about promoting military connected students on the campus and what kind of leadership administration support can they grow and improve on your campuses. They're just giving, again, everybody on that team essentially a crash course in how to do this work. They want the admin, those people, to know, like, their legislative liaison, who do they need to talk to, who's on this military committee or that military committee here or there, all that types of information. So again, there's money tied to that with the National Veterans Leadership Foundation. They have been already in coordination with the folks through the Ohio Veterans Education Council. So your institutions, knock on wood, should have a representative or multiple representatives with the Ohio Veterans Education Council. And the process is just now kind of getting underway to reach out to the schools and say, hey, start applying for this. We want to know if you can get, a certain number of students eligible for the MCA awards. Also, we want to know who your foundation staff is that we can start working with, and all those types of things. They have a couple summits planned for the foundation work as well as the leadership work. So again, that's all fairly new stuff that just passed this past summer in the budget bill. That's coming down the pike, which will be, I think, really good things for the military connected students. And I'm really curious to see, after 2 years of funding this and where it's at, like where this is going to take us. Because again, some of the schools, especially some of the private institutions that NVLF has worked at, has really made a significant difference. One of those was, I can think of, was Ashland University, significantly growing their veteran population, creating a nice veteran center, a lot more recruitment, a lot more enrollment management involvement with it. Is really a night and day difference from where they were just a few years ago. So I think that they can have a powerful impact if the school really embraces that work. I think that is most. Next slide, Brittany. I think that's most of the items I wanted to cover. So that kind of gives a really broad overview of some of the things that are happening in the state. I wanted to touch on, the Purple Star designation, as well as kind of the basics, really basics of what exists for military credit and how that just got expanded a little over a month ago, and then mention the budget items. So go ahead and open it up. If you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I don't know if you can unmute and ask them. If you can, go ahead. If not, put them in the chat.
I have one question that Abby answered, but just to put it out there, it was kind of asking to clarify what military training was. And Abby said that it can include like basic training, job-specific training, or any other type of schools that the service member attended.
Yeah, and we generally refer to it as military training experience and coursework, and when that we try to cover everything in that realm. The coursework being like what you see traditionally on the transcript. The experience is kind of more of what we would probably consider like prior learning type assessment if it's not documented on the transcript. And training is the same kind of a thing. Is there a clock hour attached to some type of training that doesn't have any evaluation that we need to look at? So there's several aspects of what we kind of generically call military training.
We can give it just a couple more seconds to see if any other questions come in. Yes, it is exciting.
Yeah, it is. And Kathy, I'll say too, like once we pass this expansion policy, there's already been a couple schools that have reached out to me like super excited about expanding this because they work with some of the OTC students or things of that nature where they're already looking at like the 900 clock hour type concept, and now that they're thinking about applying it to the military as well, they were just super excited about that. So it's been really positive change to see. So that's really cool. And who and when does ODHE notify regarding renewal of the Collegiate Purple Star? So the Collegiate Purple Star designation has a spring cycle and a fall cycle. The fall cycle literally just wrapped up. So the spring cycle is usually somewhere in March to April timeframe, and the fall cycle is usually October to very early November timeframe. And the schools basically apply, and if you earn the designation, you're good for 3 years. At that 3-year mark, the cycle that you need to renew, myself or Abby, whomever's in charge of that, will reach out to the schools and basically say, hey, here's your old application that you submitted 3 years ago. We want to see the changes. Here's the new application. Like you're up for renewal, essentially. Once that goes through, the committee reviews it, you submitted your application, everything's good to go, and you get renewed. We will send out an email to whoever submitted the application and say, hey, you have re-earned this designation. And then typically our comms folks do a press release. So the fall cycle that we just renewed, I think there's three or four schools that are renewed on there and one new school that's added back to the roster. So there should be a press release sometime within the next day or two for those institutions. And then probably this afternoon, I need to email them, and I usually give them kind of a behind the scenes like heads up, like, hey, you're renewed, you're good to go. Expect that there's going to be a press release soon, type of thing. So that's typically how that works for the renewal process. Possible to have the link again for the Purple Star, the Collegiate Purple Star page. So the easiest thing, somebody already put it on there. So Abby got it. So if you just go out to the regular highered.ohio.gov page and you just scroll down, you'll see that the Collegiate Purple Star logo on there, and you'll just click that and it takes you straight to the link. So it's right off of the main page. So good. And we've seen there's already been 2 other states that have replicated the Collegiate Purple Star, and there's a decent handful of others that are following suit. So Ohio was the founder of the K-12 Purple Star, and that is almost expanded to all 50 states now. It's just shy of that. So we're really hoping that we kind of led the way for the collegiate one as well, and we're hoping to see that expand. And we get questions all the time about how to expand that to other states. Do we have a list of non-industry training or certifications that the military offer, perhaps tied to an MOS? I'm kind of trying to work on that in some way, shape, or form. So one of the things that Abby and I are kind of doing behind the scenes is we want to try to get a list of the top credentials that the military is using for their COOL program, that credential online that the military will pay for certain certifications. And we basically want to try to do a crosswalk with that and what we have ITAGs in, so that we can essentially have that. Now that's kind of step one. Because those are only going to be applicable for the military where they've paid for like the third party credential. But I want to have kind of step 2 is I want to get more military training that is eligible for ITAGs that's not the third party, where we're treating the military like the third party, to also be part of that list. So eventually I kind of want to have both of those options, but we're not quite there yet. We're building that webpage right now for the COOL/ITAG crosswalk, but it's not ready for release yet, but hopefully that'll be fairly soon. Any other questions?
You might have already gone through this, but just one more time for some people, if you could explain kind of what it takes to get approved to have the Collegiate Purple Star designation.
Yeah, so if you go out to that link where the Purple Star is, scroll down to the bottom, you can find the Word document application on there that basically has all the requirements. So essentially it's a handful of questions where it basically asks, is your school doing this? Is your school doing this? Are you providing some type of military connected training to faculty staff? Are you awarding military credit? Do you provide priority registration? A whole list of those questions. And you can't, as an institution, you can't just say yes. No, you have to say, yes, we are doing that. Here's where it's documented. Here's where it's on our webpage, or it's in our catalog, or however it's able for us to be verified. And essentially a group of people, a review committee that's made up of, there's a a public 2-year and a public 4-year representative and a private school representative. There's a member from the National Guard, a member from the governor's office. There's a couple people from Department of Veteran Services. There's somebody from the K-12 Purple Star, and then we've got a couple from Department of Higher Ed. And basically that group reviews all of the applications, and if it's a really good application, we say, yes, it's approved, you're good to go. If there's some questions about it, we'll make some notes and we'll send whoever submitted it some questions and say, hey, the review committee has some additional questions about, item 1 or 2 or whatever. But yeah, typically that goes well, it gets approved, and we'll let the submitters know, hey, you've earned this designation, and then they'll do a press release. And then again, once you've earned that designation, it's good for 3 years. And when it's time to renew, we'll send you the old application, and then hopefully you can update it and add your new information.
Just kind of a follow-up question for people. If you are not awarded the designation, are you able to resubmit the following time the application is open?
You can resubmit as often as you need to. I won't use any names, but there's been a couple schools that have not earned the designation in their first application. And it's not like we just say, sorry, you haven't earned this designation. Like, we will tell them specifically, you need to work on number 3, 4, and 7, or whatever the case may be, and we would like to see you do this, and this is why we didn't feel that this was strong enough to be earn the designation. I would also say, you can certainly ask me questions, and there's certainly members of the Ohio Veterans Education Council, their chairs and their previous chairs, that have submitted and have earned that designation, and they're all pretty willing to share information and talk with you about how they met certain criteria. That OVEC group also has a pretty strong email listserv, so it's really good if there's military connected student questions. You can ask to that group and say, hey, how have you guys handled this? That's been used a lot. There's been a lot of discussion with the government shutdown. Thank God that's finally done. But when that was going on, there was a lot of back and forth about how are you guys handling this or that, and all of those types of things as well. So that's a good group to be involved with, because again, that's additional support for trying to submit that application for the Collegiate Purple Star. Okay. Going once, going twice. Anybody else?
If there's no other questions, so I do want to point out that this is going to be the last Transfer Talk Tuesday of the fall. So watch out for the Friends of OATN emails. I'm going to put the transfer at highered.ohio.gov email in the chat. Also, if you're not getting those emails, then feel free to reach out, and we will definitely get you on that list. And then we will send one out for when the first spring Transfer Talk Tuesday will take place. So thank you all for joining today. Thank you, Jared and Abby, and we will see everybody in the spring.
Thank you all.
Clear.